It was 1919 and the Jeffasian forces were facing a dire situation after repeated defeats at the hands of the death-strike colonial loyalist force. They had been pushed back into the Arctic mountain ranges, with their hopes of regrouping growing dimmer with each passing day. The harsh conditions and scarce supplies were taking a toll on the exhausted and battered Jeffasians, who found themselves cornered and facing an uncertain future. The Jeffasians were indeed harassed by both air raids and light armored attacks throughout their entire retreat towards the Vinson Massif mountains. The onslaught only seemed to end when the Jeffasians finally reached the base of the towering mountain range. With the threat of further attacks seemingly at bay, the Jeffasians were able to focus their attention on regrouping, strategizing, and preparing for their next move. The defeats at the Battle of Larsen Shelf and the following battles of the Palmer Lane had forced Chiang Kai-shek and his new government to strategize and find a way to halt the Death Strike forces from advancing deeper into Antarctic territory. With his favorite general and victor in the Battle of the Brunt Ice Shelf, Artyom Osten-Glehova, firmly in command, Chiang Kai-shek's hopes were riding on his top military leader's shoulders. Artyom's plan was deceptively simple. He planned to lure the Germans into a battle in the mountains by allowing them to capture a base that had been set up weeks prior. Then he would launch a two-pronged attack with Army Groups 4 and 5. With tanks unable to navigate the treacherous mountain terrain, the Germans would be forced to rely solely on their infantry, a tactical advantage that Artyom, a master of mountain warfare, was well aware of. Artyom's plan was executed flawlessly. The Germans, deceived by the convincing defensive measures at Base H, launched their assault, unaware that they had walked into a trap. Over the course of 3 days, the Jeffasians fought valiantly in the trenches of the western part of the base, before executing a well-planned withdrawal to the eastern side of the mountain range. The Germans were left frustrated and confounded, having been outmaneuvered by Artyom's cunning strategy. The Germans had only begun to establish their defenses at Base H and were in the process of requesting armor reinforcements and building roads to bring the tanks up to the front. But it was already too late. At dawn on March 17, 1919, Artyom's armies launched their attack, catching the Germans off guard and poorly prepared to defend themselves. The Jeffasians' surprise assault proved devastating, and the Germans were unable to mount an effective resistance against the onslaught. With the Germans forced onto the defensive and retreating from the mountain tops, they regrouped and established a secondary line of defense at the bottom of the mountains. However, the Jeffasians, determined not to let them regroup, immediately followed and launched a charge against the Germans' snow trenches. Despite suffering heavy casualties in the first wave, the Jeffasians pressed on, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat with the defenders in the frigid trenches. With no reserves left and facing the reality that victory depended on total commitment, Artyom made the bold decision to order both armies down the slope for a full-scale frontal attack. The Germans, driven deeper into the caves of Base H, attempted to halt the onslaught, but their defenses proved futile. The Jeffasians, driven by a mix of desperation and determination, continued their assault, pushing further into the caves and gaining the upper hand in the brutal, cramped combat. The surrender of the German forces under General Das Boot on March 19 marked a turning point in the conflict, as 2/3 of the German Colonial Army Group had been eliminated, with only 7,000 soldiers taken prisoner. The Jeffasian forces, gaining a decisive advantage, now forced the Germans into a strategic retreat, effectively halting their advance and swinging the momentum of the war in Jeffasia's favor. The Jeffasian people celebrated VM Day, or Victory Mountain Day, to mark the turning point in the conflict, as it had prevented the Germans from advancing further into Jeffasian territory and forced them to defend their gains in the Larsen Shelf. Despite the Germans' hope for reinforcements, the dire situation in their home country rendered this impossible. The war finally reached its conclusion in 1920 with the total ejection of the German forces when the Jeffasians triumphed in the Third Battle of Garum Land City. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out more videos from War Stories with Mark Felton. If you're into gaming, don't forget to stop by my gaming channel, where I crush some German noobs in my Sherman Firefly in War Thunder. It's a blast! See you at the